Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Q&A video for The Walking Dead. So I wanted to answer your guys' questions in this video. So obviously, if you do want to take part in these Q&As, definitely go and join the Discord. The server name is Appetite for the Dead. I'll leave a link down below. I do these Q&As every single Wednesday. Obviously, I'll do one next Wednesday. And we are now 25 days away until the premiere of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2, which means a lot of breakdowns of the episodes, a lot of breakdowns of things happening and all that. So definitely make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all of my Walking Dead content like that. Before we actually get into the Q&A, I do want to talk about a character that was supposed to be this big villain. It was supposed to be a villain, in terms of a villain that was that important to the story anyways. And the character's name was Alexander Davidson. And this was teased a lot before issue 100, before we actually eventually saw Negan. But Alexander Davidson was a villain that we were supposed to meet at some point in the future, but obviously we just never, got to see the character. The character was like a founder of Alexandria, and there was a bunch of stuff to the character, but obviously we never saw the character and there was no mention of the character, and they just went in a totally different direction with the story. Apparently they actually reintroduced Alexander Davidson in a really hilarious way, and it has to do with, I guess, this like small Walking Dead comic thing or whatever, where basically there's like a comic series that makes fun of things that happen on The Walking Dead, and it's called Small Bites. And apparently they actually introduced Alexander Davidson in an issue, and yeah, it's done more for comedic reasons, I would say now, obviously, right? And we learned that Alexander Davidson has been living out in the woods, basically training squirrels, and that is basically it. Carl finds him apparently, and it's obviously at this point there's not really a way that you could introduce that character, I guess, because of, there was a lot of excitement, I guess, over who he would be, if he would be a bigger villain than Negan, because he was the founder of Alexandria and maybe he had this whole bigger backstory of like who he was or whatever. But I just thought that it was kind of interesting that they actually did that here, because again, I don't really follow any of the Walking Dead comic stuff anymore ever since the Walking Dead comic ended. I guess afterwards I did collect the Walking Dead Deluxe issues for a bit, and I still do want to go and collect, the ones that I haven't collected. I think I collected all the way up to like issue 30 or 40, like somewhere around there is where I stopped, and I know that they're around issue 90 now, right? And I think they do 2 every single month. Maybe that schedule has changed, but that's from what I remember anyways. Issue 100 is coming up very soon. I think 96 just came out like today, I think, actually. So maybe next month for October, it's 97 and 98, and then November is 99 and 100, right? I think that'd be really cool. Just because Robert Kirkman does talk about The Walking Dead a lot in the Walking Dead Deluxe issues, and, we haven't really heard from him a lot and just in general with The Walking Dead, but that is something that if you do want to hear him talk about The Walking Dead, like that is where to see that, right? Like he gives thoughts mostly on The Walking Dead comics and whatnot, and certain story decisions and how he came up with this and that and whatever. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that because I thought it was kind of cool. I wouldn't mind doing a whole video on Alexander Davidson actually, and just really getting into who this character was and what he could have been, and just that whole thing there. But but let's actually get into the Q&A here. So first of all, thank you so much for posting all of your questions. First question: do you think Ash will die, and how do you think he would? Yes, I do think he's going to die. I posted a video last night, actually. It was very late last night. It was a death predictions video on Daryl Dixon Season 2, and I said that Ash would die. So yeah, I do think he's going to die. In terms of how I think he's going to die, it's likely going to be to try and save Carol, I'm guessing. Well, you know what? No, it's probably, that's too obvious and too predictable, I would say. The one thing that I'll say, I guess, is maybe that the people that Carol and Ash are with eventually turn on them, because if you look at the shot here, we saw this in the most recent teaser trailers, but you see Carol and Ash with 2 other characters, and we don't see them at all after these shots. And so I'm assuming that, as soon as they eventually get pretty close to friends, something happens where these 2 characters turn on Carol and Ash, which will likely result in Ash's death, and then Carol obviously survives, because Carol, I think, will be in France by herself looking for Daryl. Ash is not with her at that point. So I'm assuming that Ash is going to die at some point beforehand. It's likely going to be in the beginning of episode 2. I don't think it's going to happen, in the later half of episode 1, just because I guess it could happen. Like the episode's called The Kindness of Strangers. And so maybe, Ash's kindness and, helping Carol get to France is the focus of the episode. And maybe it means a lot more than just Ash, and it has, more meaning to do with Daryl's story as well. But maybe it also ends with Ash dying at the very end, but Carol is now in France kind of thing, right? I could see that happening, but Yeah, I think it's gonna die for sure, and I do have a feeling that it's likely these two characters involved because Carol seems to be alone once she actually gets to France and is looking for Daryl. So I think that Ash and these two characters are likely going to be gone pretty early on here. Q&A, if another spinoff were to be made, not about a possible endgame, which characters do you think are going to be in it, and what story will they try to tell or add to the main lore? I don't know if you've already talked about this in a video. Yeah, I've answered questions like this before, and, you know, obviously my answers will change. That's why when it comes to questions like this, I will answer all the time, just because, you know, like, obviously, as you watch different episodes or you watch, the next season of a show, you'll just start to want different things, I think, from The Walking Dead. And I think right now, in terms of a spin-off that I would like to see is an original story, but I think not set in, like, you know, a winter setting, because I always thought that's exactly what I wanted, was like an original story set around like a winter setting. But I think if anything, make it more like classic Walking Dead again, but maybe there's some more, you know, I guess fresher elements to it. You know, I'd like to watch a lot of stuff from like the very beginning of the apocalypse. I think that's something that's always a lot of fun. Like Fear the Walking Dead was always promised to be that spinoff, or at least it was originally. It was like, we're going to see the, you know, the downfall and how all that happened. And I know a lot of us at the time were like wondering, like, well, how does that make a lot of sense? And I know that at least for myself at the time, I thought that, you know, that meant that we were going to see literally the apocalypse happen, and that the show would be set just around that timeline, that it would be a shorter spinoff and it wouldn't really go too much farther than that. But obviously after season 1, they pretty much just went past that. Season 2 went in a totally different direction, and it was like in the apocalypse. And then by the end of the series, they caught up with The Walking Dead. So definitely very different. So I think focusing on a story like that would be a lot of fun, you know, making a show based off of literally the beginning of the apocalypse and just focusing on some newer characters and telling a different story there, I think would be really cool, because you would have not a lot of expectations there. You know, if the trailer looked really cool because the characters were really awesome and you had some really cool moments in the trailer, a lot of people would check it out and be like, oh, it's kind of cool. Even if you have lower expectations because you're like, well, this is more of the same, maybe you go and watch it and then you like the characters and stuff and you like that world, and then you're like, all right, I like this story, I'm going to keep watching, kind of thing. So I would really like that, because I think of that Tales of the Walking Dead episode where it focused on Atlanta and we saw a different perspective of, you know, I guess what it was like in Atlanta at the time. And obviously that episode was, I mean, man, I really want to do a video or just more videos on Tales of the Walking Dead, because those episodes were really wild. Like, honestly, those episodes were just really everywhere. And it's so interesting because I look at The Walking Dead right now and I think AMC needs to do more stuff like that, but definitely make it matter more. But those episodes were so much fun. Like, even though I wasn't a fan of some of the episodes, I think that if you would have made things matter a lot more and connected it more to the Walking Dead story, then fans would have loved it, because then a season 2, like, that was the whole thing about Tales of the Walking Dead. And I think out of all of the shows, honestly, that's the one show that I feel like failed the most. And it's because there was so much that you could have done. Like, honestly, so much of the story you could have connected to other moments in The Walking Dead or like the other shows, right? A season 2 of Tales of the Walking Dead could have brought the governor back, or like other characters. Like, that show had so much excitement to it that you know, AMC obviously not renewing it for a season 2 right away, it kind of made sense based off of what they did with the story. And I don't know why they made the writing decisions that they made, because like the story could have been really well done. And again, you look at that one episode in Tales of the Walking Dead with Atlanta, and it really honestly was a really interesting episode before you got into some of the weirder stuff with like the timeline and everything. Like, I liked the fact that we were seeing a different perspective on like newer characters in Atlanta. That was so cool, honestly. Like, even doing a new spin-off set in Atlanta as well, but you just focus on other characters that maybe went in a different direction than like Rick and his group did, right? Like, I would love that. And I think that's just, again, people like just that story there of The Walking Dead, and I think that episode proved it. There was a lot, honestly, in Tales of the Walking Dead that when you really look at what they did there's a lot to like in almost every episode, but it's just there's crucial decisions, like story decisions, that if you would have just changed this and connected this to this moment or to this moment, people would have been like, whoa, that's actually really great, and I really do like this series, right? But obviously they never did that, and I think it just frustrated a lot of people because a lot of fans, I mean, honestly, Tales of the Walking Dead just ended up being one of those things that just ended up being something to laugh at. And I think that was definitely, obviously, not the right response that they wanted, I think, for Tales of the Walking Dead. I mean, maybe, but I don't think so. And that's why I don't like the talk of the musical and all that either, because, like, obviously they're just joking, but that's the stuff that does, like, hurt The Walking Dead. Like, obviously, if you're gonna do it, maybe don't make it, like, the main thing. You know what I mean? Like, if there's a bunch of Walking Dead stuff happening, and then there's, like, a musical thing that's happening, I mean, that's fine, because obviously I'm not gonna really pay attention to that, and that's totally fine. Musicals just aren't for me. I'm really, like, honestly not the biggest fan of musicals at all, so whoever likes musicals might actually like that. But yeah, I just think that, you know, in terms of another spinoff and stuff, they should really focus a lot on some of the pre-apocalyptic stuff, because that was something that fans seem to really respond to well in Tales of the Walking Dead. And whenever there's flashback scenes in general, people just seem to really like that. So Q&A, in The Ones Who Live, we get the introduction of the CRM's 10-year projection, where living human life has 10 years before extinction. Do you think this implies a for sure reunion of the main cast, or was it just a throwaway line? I think that there is some truth to it, but it's more in how you interpret, I guess, Beale's mindset on that, and, like, I guess his research on that as well, because obviously they could be wrong. Beale doesn't have all the right answers, and I think that's one of the things going into the next however many years of The Walking Dead that we'll always wonder about, like, was Beale right about that? And that's something that we could start to see over time, is that walkers are starting to decay quite a bit. But it's also a line that it's like, again, like, that's really cool to see, but, you know, after we get to that point, we'll have to just wait and see if it happens, because what if they choose to go in a different direction with the story? Then it might not matter overall, right? I don't think it means anything in terms of a reunion, though. Like, I don't think Scott Gimple is going to limit himself in terms of reuniting all the characters to, like, 14 years, right? Like, it has to happen within this amount of time before everything becomes extinct. Like, I think that line was really just there because it makes sense, and I'm sure that there is some truth to it, but that's one of the things that we're all just kind of wondering about too in general, is, like, how right was Beale? And I guess we're not going to really know as of right now. But the hilarious thing about it, though, is I can totally see a scenario in, like, 20 years from now, if we're making videos and whatnot, or maybe the timeline's different or something, and they jump forward 20 years, and maybe that show, like, the next generation show happens in, like, 2030, and this whole era is over, whatever. I can just see videos being made of you know, just discussion on, was Beale right? Or it turns out Beale was right after all, sort of thing, right? And, again, we'll just have to wait and see where that eventually is going to go. But that's the thing too, is Beale is likely going to be wrong, I think, overall, because of the fact that Judith and RJ, Herschel, and everyone else are likely going to get, like, this next generation spinoff at some point in the future, right? So, yeah, I do think that obviously Beale's going to end up being wrong, but as of right now, we'll have to wait and see. Like, we have no idea, but it definitely wasn't a tease or a hint at, like, all the characters reuniting before then, because I just don't think that they would ever limit themselves in that way, because I just think that, I mean, that's the one thing that I've learned about Scott Gimple, is that he doesn't really do that. Like, I almost want him to commit to things a little bit more in terms of the story, right? Like, with the triple P card or certain things that are teased, like, he always teases this or that, and then eventually just kind of goes nowhere, because if, say, you know, a show doesn't get renewed for another season, or if the plans for the show changes and they go to another spinoff, then he can sort of change, you know, I guess, where the story was going overall. And that's the thing, is, like, I wish certain things were more certain, I guess, you know, but I think that's just kind of what's frustrating in general with The Walking Dead. But I think that overall, he does handle it pretty well, because you can also look at that as, like, a good thing, right? Like, you don't want it to be one of those things where he introduces an idea and you're getting really excited about that, but then has to completely ignore it because they're going in a totally different direction, right? Like, I would say that was one of the things that happened with the Reaper arc, was that the Reapers were really, really exciting in the beginning, and then as soon as they announced that The Walking Dead was going to be ending in season 11, the Reaper arc just completely, like, it ended so fast. And I do think if the Walking Dead was still going on, like, as of right now, which it should have been, right? Because that was the plan, was that the main show would still be going, but all the other characters would still have the spinoffs that we have right now. Then, you know, the Reaper arc likely would have been a bigger story on that show. So, yeah, but anyways, I'm gonna leave it here. Definitely make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this, and I'll see you guys in the next one.